Welcome to the Writer Groupie podcast. I'm Kim Smith, the writing guru, bringing you discussions, insights, and insider details on planning, producing, promoting, and profiting as a writer. This is a podcast by writers for writers. You can find out more about Writer Groupie at www.kimsmithauthor.com. And here's the next episode of Writer Groupie. Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 43 of Writer Groupie. And tonight I'm chatting with Erin Drown, and Erin is the cover artist and a graphic design artist for Erin Drown Designs. And I've been to your website, Erin. It looks fantastic, and I want to know more. So how did you get into design work?
Well, I kind of stumbled into it by accident, actually. I was working at Kinko's about 20-something more years ago, and that was back when the whole desktop publishing thing just kind of broke wide open with the advent of Apple's release of laser printers and things like that. And I'd always kind of taken an interest in creating documents, even back when, I'm embarrassed to say, when I was on my dad's Commodore 64, making I would make like Dungeons and Dragons sheets for my friends and stuff, and it was fun. I always liked it. So, and the thing about working at Kinko's was that because of the nature of the business, they were always on had to stay on the cutting edge of and so there's always a parade of new toys coming through the shop. And I was in college at the time, and the intent was to study criminal justice. I mean, I was studying criminal justice. I was going to join the Navy. I was going to go into military law. And after a long talk with my father, who was a career Navy, I decided that it probably just wasn't for me. And but I was at the time I was growing really frustrated with college, with all the hoops and the bureaucracy, and I just kind of realized that, you know what, I can read this book on my own as readily as I can, waiting for a professor to tell me to read it. So so I just kind of started an informal self-tutelage, because working at Kinko's, especially in the computer services area as I was, there was a steady flow of regulars who would come through who were working graphic designers, and I would be able to ask questions, and because they leave their files and say, hey, I need printouts of this or whatnot, and so I would take to back engineering their work and asking, hey, how'd you do this, and was really fortunate to happen across a couple of particular mentors, or de facto mentors, who really sort of took me under their wing and were really generous with the information that they provided. And when I realized that graphic design really is one of the few remaining fields where ability trumps credentials.
Right.
In fact, one of those mentors once told me that any place that insists on seeing your degree before they see your portfolio is probably someplace you don't want to really work anyway.
That makes so much sense.
And for the most part, it's held true. Ironically, I ended up going back to the University of Memphis that I dropped out of, and working for them as the in-house graphic designer, as the lead designer for their alumni magazine for the better part of 14 years.
Wow.
And people in the Memphis area will know that the university has been going through some issues as of late, and so there was a large a rash of layoffs and restructuring, and I was one of the lucky winners. And so I was able to, but I took a long, hard look at where I was, and I realized that there was never going to be a better time for me to jump in and start, and do this on my own. As I've told many folks, I decided that if I was doomed to work for an idiot, it may as well be me. So,
I love that. You know, you may, because it just occurred to me, and I don't know if anybody else has pinned this or not, but you may have started a new field called Artistpreneur.
Maybe.
Hey,
Okay.
how about that?
We'll say that's exactly what I've done.
There you go. You're an artistpreneur. You've gone out there and you've blazed a trail, you know, doing it yourself. And I think that's fabulous. I'm all about that. I'm an indie author and I'm an indie publisher. I'm all about the indie movement, as it were. You know, there's an awful lot of that going on. There's a lot of people who are building kitchen gardens and stuff. They're going the indie food route. A lot of people believe in supporting, you know, local indie whatever. I mean, there's a pretty good movement for indie stuff these days. So you really are in a good time and in a good place to go this way.
I think so, because I mean, I like to think so. Thank you very much. But I can't help but also but feel fortunate in a way that we're entering into what a lot of people are terming the gig economy, where people are focusing more on the small, you know, independent, individual jobs, as opposed to working for the same company for, you know, 23, 25 years and getting the watch and all that. And you've probably heard in the news about people, you know, especially in the older generation, lamenting the fact that millennials and people of that generation are hopping jobs and, you know, changing careers or changing companies every few years. And I think you're right. I think there is a definite trend toward people looking smaller, and because they realize that's where the quality is with the individual. So
and there's a hunger there. I mean, I know it for myself that, you know, when you're doing it yourself, you're hungry for business. You're hungry for clients. You're hungry for readership. You're hungry for, you know, clients. I mean, that's important to you. So, you know, you're going to continue to build on that and develop your business. And I think that it has something, maybe in my opinion, to do with the recession that we've just come out of. An awful lot of people lost their jobs. And well, necessity is the mother of invention. You know,
yeah, absolutely.
They had to go out and they had to find something that they were good at to make a living because they didn't have a job anymore. And so, you know, that's how things get started. I mean, necessity makes somebody go and get busy, and then somebody sees their success and says, I'm going to try that too. And then somebody sees their success, and the next thing you know, you have a movement. And I just really feel like now is the time.
I think you have something there. I think you're right.
So listen, let's discuss book covers. Since this is Writer Groupie, and most all of my viewers are either writers or readers,
Okay.
What are some of the common things you're seeing in covers today, especially, you know, the do-it-yourselfers? Maybe there's a trend that you see that maybe we haven't seen mainstream yet, or maybe you're seeing some bad things that people are doing with covers that you think maybe needs to be discussed.
I hope I don't come across as a complete snob, but one of the reasons I decided to focus on book covers and illustration as a target audience, or clientele rather, I should say, is that as an author, I'm published. I have a novel through Seventh Star Press called A Mage Had Done Magic, and I published a bunch of short stories and things like that. And so I understand from both sides of the equation that even though it's nice that people don't judge, you know, a book by its cover, unfortunately everyone does.
They do.
And, but also as a designer, knowing that it doesn't take a whole lot to put together a good-looking product, and it really is important to. I mean, a writer is a writer, and their sense of as a generality, I'm speaking, of course, their sense of the aesthetic lies with, you know, the prose, and so their field of expertise may not necessarily, that sense of the aesthetic doesn't necessarily translate over to the visual. And and that's okay because it's a whole different ball game. And so but being both, excuse me, I really thought I would like to try to help writers, especially those of limited means. That's why I focus on small press and independent and self-publisher. It doesn't take a lot to just put the bow on, to make something that looks nice. You don't have to spend, excuse me, I'm sorry, $5,000 on an illustration and a layout. I mean, you can do things on the cheap, but still look like you know what you're doing, and that's what it's all about. It's about putting forth the illusion of professionalism and big press sensibilities, I suppose, when doing it on a shoestring.
What do you think are some of the things that a DIYer should do to present themselves in a professional light? If you were designing a cover for someone and they gave you what they thought needed to be on the cover, for example, it's been my experience as a writer that I don't really know what to put on my cover. I want to throw everything in the kitchen sink on there. I think every thread, every subplot, and everything that happens in that book needs to be on the cover. Now, I know that's not true, but I think that's just a tendency of most writers. So
it is, and I agree. But it's not just the writers. It's with it's a larger sensibility with clients in general. A lot of people seem to have a deep-seated concern, if not fear, that their audience is just not going to get it. They get it, but they're afraid that somebody's going to miss something or not understand, or there's going to be some detail that they're not going to appreciate. And so I get it. But while I say that writers have an inherently different sense of aesthetic, given the medium in which they work, there are lots and lots of parallels, and that's one of the advantages I've had, I think, over other designers in this area of book design that other designers don't have, because, like I said, I am a writer, and I understand how metaphor works. I understand how to distill things down to the greatest common denominator, and I don't say least common denominator because you want more than just that. Otherwise, you put the title of your book, on this is my book in black ink on a white cover, and that'd be it.
Yeah, but, exactly.
But just as with in working with words, and when you're working with imagery, less is more. Now that's I say the word a lot. It's a generality. I mean, it depends on the artist and what have you. There are artists who work in hyper detail. But if you're talking about a book cover, you need something, in my opinion, you need something that's simple, that is striking, that is interesting. It doesn't give the whole thing away. It avoids cliche. Maybe even something a little different. I just did a cover for Seventh Star Press, Steven Zimmer, in his Hellscapes 2 collection.
I've seen it. Very nice.
Oh, thank you. And it's something different than I've ever done, and I was really pleased with it, and so was he, thankfully, because happy client, happy designer.
Exactly.
But
return business.
Exactly. And I had a point I was going to make about the less is more. That cover is striking. There's not a lot to it, when you actually get down and analyze it, but
you've got the focal point in the right place,
right?
And it is striking. And I think that no, we're not going to tell you what's on this cover, people. You're going to have to go out and look up Hellscapes 2. Seventh Star Press's new release. Go get it.
Yeah,
but it is definitely, and it's the color scheme you used as well, I think.
Well, yeah, and honestly, that's you talk about necessity is the mother of invention. I have to confess that I picked that color scheme to differentiate from the previous volume, Volume 1, because that had kind of a black-red thing, and it was I won't say cliched, but it did the whole fire, molten lava, thing. And so I wanted something that was going to be visually different from the first version. And quite honestly, the other book covers I'd done so far had that same color scheme of reds and yellows, and just by happenstance. I mean, it wasn't planned. And so personally, for my portfolio, I needed something that was not those colors. So I sold Steven Zimmer on the yellow and the green. So don't tell him I pulled one over on him.
I won't, but I think it's very good. I like the cover, and I think that.
And the point I was going to make is that it's a simple it's a simple cover. I mean, the details of the illustration are one thing, but I'm talking about as far as focal points go. Like you said, it's one thing. It encapsulates, the contents of the book rather than point for point lays them all out for everyone to see. And that's the hardest leap for a lot of people to make, is that distillation process of trusting the audience that they're going to get the feeling for the book in one single cover image.
Also, I think, and I could be wrong, you'll have to correct me if I am, that the author has a tendency to not trust the artist to get the point across.
Oh, yeah. I did my own cover. I mean, for my own novel, for that very reason. Because I knew what I wanted it to be, and I knew how I wanted to look. And now that's not to say I was delighted when Seventh Star re-released my book in 2014, and had been published with another publisher back in 2009. And Seventh Star bought it up, and they included some interior illustrations done in pencil with a terrific artist, and that was a lot of fun because I was able to just kind of step back and let someone else. I was curious to see what their interpretation was going to be. But that was because I was sitting in a comfort zone of knowing what the cover was going to be. I'd already redone the layout and everything, and so I had that. But it can be, even for me, to relinquish that control for someone else with any artistic endeavor. It's tough.
It's very much a collaborative effort between the artist and the author, because the author knows the story and the artist knows the design. So when you meld the two together, then you probably come up with a really delicious cover. And so,
and since I did my own cover, the way it worked for my novel Mage was the artist, I believe they requested just a couple of passages that they thought that I thought would make compelling illustrations.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I gave those to him, and he sketched them out and tossed them back. And I said, well, that's really great, but this little detail is wrong because they're not really doing that. But it was little ticky things. Mm-hmm. But the collaboration definitely was. I had fun with that.
I think that every author would love to have that kind of input into the design of their cover. Unfortunately, traditionally published authors generally do not. They may have some input on the title, and they may have some input on what might go on the cover, but really, from what I understand, their complete input is not usually something that's given a lot of credence. So
I play with that too, and I think it's a mistake. I think it's also a mistake to go too far the other way and let the author have too much say.
Oh, well, I agree.
And but just now I'm actually doing an interior layout for a publisher in Canada, and I just sent an email to the author asking, I've got this little thing I can't quite figure out, and I haven't had time to actually read the book, just skimming the text. So is there a symbol or an image or something that you feel would work, from the story that I can use here? And I'm waiting to hear back. But I think it's important if you look at the book, and by the book I mean the physical thing you hold in your hand, or what you have loaded on your iPad, I suppose, as a cohesive whole, it's important that all the parts work together. I had a friend of mine, Joel Rosenberg, who passed away some years ago, but he was a good friend of mine, and I'll never forget, there was a novel of his in his series, The Guardians of the Flame, where he hated oh my God, he hated the cover so much, and he tried to get them to change it, and they wouldn't, and he just lamented. He had a lot of terrible things to say about it. I won't repeat them here, but
I have a clean rating.
Yeah, I understand. I don't understand the I understand from a production standpoint where you can't, if you're a company and you're churning out, a book a week, you can't gum up the works to coddle every author that you're printing. But since I'm not doing that, that's not what I'm doing. I think it's important to seek the input of the writer, at least with some things, so you get it right.
Right.
And you have that cohesion I was mentioning.
Right. Well, I've heard that some covers sell better if they have people on the front. What do you think about that? Is that a genre-specific thing?
I don't know. I personally, as a consumer, I don't know that it matters that much to me. In fact, I may even kind of shy away from covers with pictures on them because I think that I think it takes away from my ability to fill in the gaps myself. It predisposes me to think of this character looking like that, as opposed to and what if it's not even right? I mean, I think I've heard that same thing. I don't know whether it's true, whether or what sort of statistic. I don't know. It might be true. I don't know. But that doesn't really factor into the equation for me. I mean, it's about making something that just looks good. I think what you're talking about more is a marketing concern, and the level that you and I are dealing with, working at right now with the independents and the small presses. That kind of marketing strategy just really doesn't enter into the process, I think, because it doesn't need to.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And, this may be a genre-specific thing because it seems to me like mostly romances have people on the covers. Now, sure. I will say there was a period of time, a trend in thrillers where there was every cover for a thriller had a running man in silhouette.
Right.
Some kind of a dark man in silhouette. And I don't know why that was, popular or vogue at the time, but it was, and I think we've kind of dismissed that. I don't see that as much on thriller covers as I did at one time. So, Erin, you've been doing this for some time, and like I've said, I've seen your website, I've seen some of your work, and your editorial design is very, very good. And so, give us 3 tips for somebody who's trying to DIY their book cover.
Well, I'll give you 4 because the first one is going to be don't. It's
That's a good one.
Get some help, and the reason I say that is not to be glib or self-serving. It's that if you have poured your heart and soul into this work, give it its best chance at life once it's out the door, and it doesn't take, as I said earlier, it doesn't take a whole lot of investment. I mean, if you're talking about years of your life to put together a book, surely it's worth a couple $300 maybe to have somebody put together a really nice looking cover that you're happy with, because it's just basically leave it to the experts. Now, let's say you can't. There's just no way you could possibly afford that, and that's I understand that.
We are starving artists.
Exactly. So I think my first tip would be to research, look around, see what other people have done, see what the big presses have done, because you've seen those shows where you take the room that was designed by the world-class interior designer, and it's got the several $1,000 pieces here and there, and that's your inspiration room, and you create a room, on the cheap that looks very much like it.
I have seen that, and I'm always marveling at that, thinking, man, that's really awesome.
And I think that's a viable strategy. Look around and see what people are doing, and see if you can find something that has been done that falls within your skill level or ability, and use that as the inspiration room. Now, don't duplicate it.
Oh no.
Don't copy someone else's cover. That's not what I'm saying. So that'd be my first tip. Look around and see what people are doing, and you could come across something that you could put together yourself if you're insistent upon it. Second tip would be, I think what you and I talked about is avoid the temptation to throw in the kitchen sink. I mean, if you're a person of limited ability anyway, as far as design work goes, the fewer elements that are in your design, the fewer things that there are for you to mess up.
Right.
So keep it simple. Less is more. Just like in your prose. I mean, you take out all the varies and the adverbs and stuff that you don't need. If keep your prose lean, keep your design lean. And the third would be,
that actually was 3. Don't.
Was it? Don't.
Don't.
Well,
keep it simple, and see what else is out there.
Right.
And so you said 4, though. Did you have another one?
Well, I was prefacing my 3 with that don't.
Don't. Okay, I gotcha.
But I can't think of a third one. I mean, don't be afraid to. My advice would be it's really better not to put something out that is bad than it is to. I always tell my kids it's better to do it right than to do it now, and don't confuse the two. It's a tough thing to when you've got your book done and you know it's done and it's typeset and it looks great and you can't wait to get it out there. Sometimes just like in the editing process, you do your first draft and you set it aside and you let it chill for a while, and you come back to it with fresh eyes. If the design thing has not happened for you, set it aside and come back to it in just a little bit, or ask opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, for whatever it's worth, I think that's my lousy advice.
Well, one thing that I have to say about design that I'm trying to teach myself to do better with is typography. I think that maybe that might be a place where a lot of DIYers get it wrong. Am
Yes.
I right?
Yes. And that's an easy thing to mess up, but it's also an easy thing to get right. I don't think I'm giving away any industry secrets by saying that the rule of thumb when it comes to fonts on your cover or any really piece is 2. You really don't need any more than 2. And if you need more than 2, you need to really understand why you need more than 2. There better be a good reason. There are lots of bad trends and decisions that people make with their typography. Again, if you look at my website, the samples on my website, it's all pretty simple and straightforward.
And easy to read. I love it.
Well, thank you. The typography really, type is just another design element in the overall. It doesn't exist separate from the rest of the book cover, so it needs to work with it.
Right.
And but again, that's something that an experienced designer would be able to spot that a relative novice may not necessarily understand.
Right.
So.
Okay, so say we have an aspiring artistpreneur out there who wants to break into designing book covers. What would you say to them? What advice would you give to them? What do you wish somebody had told you?
Well, I'm still learning, actually, because I'm still, as you know, I'm still bothering everybody who will listen and giving them my card and saying, hey, look, I'm a writer too, and I understand, and I can help you out, and I can help you avoid a lot of the pitfalls that people seemed determined to fall into. It's really just as with writing and getting, landing a publisher, landing a client, it requires the same amount of handshaking and shoe leather and all that stuff. I send cold emails to publishers. I've got a long list of small presses, independent presses that I send almost every day, just saying, hey, I'm here, and this is what I do, and if you ever need any of the help that I can provide, let me know. I'll be happy to lend a hand. It's the vacuum cleaner salesman from the 50s. You just go door to door to door to door, And every now and then, someone
You'll
says,
strike
sure,
it
come in.
rich.
Yeah.
I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think that a lot of DIYers or indie entrepreneurs, people who are out there doing things for themselves, building businesses of their own, I think that there's an awful lot of that goes on. I mean, how else are you supposed to get clients if you're not knocking on doors and knocking on people? So you guys, be kind. Be kind to people out there who are artists and authors who are trying to get you to buy their books and to hire them for design work and editing and things like that. I've been very, very fortunate to meet people like yourself, Aaron, who do things like that and who benefit the author/artist community. So I'm just thrilled to death to have been able to have you on my show tonight.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
I'm excited about the fact that you and I live in the same Mid-South region, so we're going to probably be seeing more of each other. You going to Mid-South Con this year?
I am, and I'll be at the comic and the comic and fantasy convention. That's the weekend after this. I think it's the weekend of the 20th.
Oh, I didn't know about that one.
Oh, yeah, well, you check it out. Memphis Comic and Fantasy Convention. I think that's right. And I'm a panelist there, and I forget exactly where it's being held. I apologize, but yeah, Google it. It's out there, and I believe it's. I'll look at my calendar real fast, but I do believe that it's the weekend of October 20th.
Okay.
Yes.
October, because this
Comic
is
and Fantasy Convention.
It's November.
What did I say? October?
Yeah.
November. Yeah, it's November.
It's November. Okay.
This month. Whatever month this is, it's this month.
Okay, so, well, that's awesome. Maybe I'll be able to sneak away and try and be a part of that next week, and I'll come and be your heckler. How's that?
Awesome. One last little bit of advice, if you don't mind, with
Sure.
with the people just getting started, I meant to get to, and I think it's very important for authors and artists alike. Get paid. Get paid for your work. If you choose to donate work, make sure you understand why you're doing it. No one buys groceries with exposure.
True.
Artists of any ilk deserve to be paid for work. If it's worth someone asking you for it, it's worth getting paid, even if it's a pittance. I mean, when you first start out, of course, you're first starting out. You're not going to command huge fees,
Right.
But your work deserves to be paid for. So.
And I'm a photographer, and I can tell you from the pro side that I can take that a step further, and I can say that if you find someone who wants to use you for your expertise and they don't want to pay a normal rate for your services, they are not your target client.
Probably not.
No, they're not. Because there are people out there who they can't afford it, they know they can't afford it, and all they're trying to do is get something for nothing. And they'll nickel and dime you absolutely to death.
Yeah.
If you're a pro and you're doing this for a business and this is how you're feeding your family, that's not your target client. Look higher. That's my advice.
Well, good advice. I'll take that to heart.
Okay,
Thanks.
well, all right. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on Writer Groupie tonight. I have had a blast. I've learned so much. You're just a barrel of information.
Oh, my gosh. I'm sorry.
And you know what?
Yeah.
I want to know, is there going to be another book?
Yes, you and my publisher, they both have that same question. Yes, there is. I'm working on it. I've had to put it on the back burner for a lot of the reasons that I mentioned, getting started with the design work and things. When you're thrown from the boat, your focus is learning how to swim.
Exactly.
And that takes precedence. So, but yes, there is. And I'm working on it now, and I'll hopefully have it ready, to hand in sometime next year.
Let me tell you, we have a group called Authors Unplugged who meets every Thursday night at Panera Bread down south here. And if you ever want to come and be a part of that, you're off just welcome. Just come.
Send me that information.
I will. We just meet up at Panera Bread about 6:00 on Thursday evenings, and it's more like a mastermind group where we talk about, writing and editing and marketing and a lot of that kind of thing. We don't spend a whole lot of time critiquing. Now, if somebody's got a big problem, they need somebody to give them an opinion, we'll definitely share. But as a general rule, it's not really a critique group. It's more of a let's get together and let's put our brains together and let's see what we can share and, kind of build each other up as writers. So you're welcome to join that.
Sounds like fun.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to close the show down, and I will be talking to you soon. We're friends online. I see you everywhere, and I'm sure. Well, you know what? Tell us where we can find you.
You can find my design work at aarondrawndesign.com. There are links there to my Facebook page as well, but you can just type in Aaron Drown Design on Facebook, and I'm sure you'll find me. I have an author page as well. I write under the name of A. Christopher Drown, and that's not pretension. There's another Aaron Drown out in Los Angeles who works for Disney, and he's got some television writing credits, so that's why I write under a slightly different name. Yeah, that's how you find me.
A. Christopher Drown.
For my writing, yes.
For your writing, okay. Just want to make sure I got that because it kind of sounded like it might have cut out. Well, all right. Well, that's all the news that we can do. I've worn you out of taking all your brain and dumped it out into this podcast. So. All right, hang in there. We'll talk soon.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to this edition of Writer Groupie. For booking information, show notes, and more, visit kimsmithauthor.com.